There were already two men standing directly at my desk when I returned from my lunch break. Both wore expensive business suits that were far too formal for a casual Wednesday afternoon. One was flipping through my sticky notes, while the other held a company laptop. I did not ask questions, I simply watched them. "Sir," the one wearing the thin tie said, not looking up, "we have been instructed to collect all company assets. Your system access has been revoked." Amusingly, I still had root access active on a private mobile application that no one else in the building knew existed. I nodded, placed my salad down, and told them I needed to grab my bag. Instead, I reached under my chair, grabbed the encrypted drive taped to the underside, slid it into my jacket, and walked past the Human Resources office. "We are all one team here," the framed quote read, a joke so cruel it bordered on performance art. 5 minutes later, while I was waiting in the queue at the parking garage payment station, my phone vibrated. It was not a personal text message, but a system log notification from my hidden server application. The display read, 1436, unauthorized instance access attempt detected. Then it read, 1437, Tier 3 privileges escalated by user system. Immediately after, it displayed 1438, asset Nexus initiated contingency mode. Finally, it showed 1439, failover countdown initiated, T-minus 7 hours and 21 minutes. I looked up. The driver behind me was chewing his gum aggressively. The parking attendant waved my sedan through the gate without making eye contact. Everything appeared normal on the surface. But nothing was actually normal because the Nexus system was never supposed to trigger its backup failover protocol. Not unless someone attempted to overwrite the core software engine, and if someone had obtained high enough administrative permissions to trigger that specific protocol. They were not just exploring the system, they were actively trying to take ownership of it. None of the executives upstairs who enjoyed their golden parachutes had any understanding of what Nexus actually did when it panicked. They believed they had terminated my employment neatly and cleanly, like a simple spreadsheet adjustment. What they had actually done was detonate a digital tripwire buried so deep in the network infrastructure that even the consultants who wrote the compliance manuals had never seen it. The best part of the situation was that they would be begging for my technical assistance in 7 hours unless Nexus completely disabled their systems first. The first phone call came from Daniel in the DevOps department. His name flashed across my mobile screen while I was loading my laundry into a dryer at the 24-hour laundromat on 6th Avenue, since my new apartment did not have laundry appliances yet. Daniel used to bring me a double espresso with 2 sugars every Tuesday morning. Now, his voice sounded thin and strained over the phone line. "Julian, we have a major situation," he said. I asked him if he meant the fact that they had scraped my name and profile out of the organization directory like mold off a piece of bread. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Daniel spoke again. The client-side database sync just duplicated 20,000 invoices across the European Union server node. The billing systems are locked in an infinite loop. Nobody can override the process. The legal team is screaming. I flipped a silver quarter between my fingers. If it landed on tails, I would hang up the phone. If it landed on heads, I would play the role of the creator. The coin dropped to the floor, balancing on its edge against the metal lint trap. "Nexus is awake," I said quietly, "and he is not fond of betrayal." Daniel asked what I meant by that. I stood up and asked him how the system failover was managing the cache migration process. Daniel did not answer because he did not know. The cache migration system did not exist on any of the official flowcharts. I had built it with root-only authorization and named it after a Greek tragedy for a very specific reason. "You need to come back to the office," Daniel whispered. I told him that I did not need to do anything. He told me that this failure could destroy the major contract with Zurich. I looked out the laundromat window. Across the street, a man in a costume was yelling at a bus driver. Somewhere in Zurich, a partner executive was probably watching a real-time monitor display their profits dive into the ground. I told Daniel to inform corporate management that if they wanted Nexus to return to normal, they needed to send someone with more power than a middle manager who had coffee withdrawals. Then I hung up the phone. The truth was that Nexus was not broken at all. The system was simply making a decision. When I built the architecture, I had already experienced enough corporate layoffs and false performance reviews to protect myself. I gave the system teeth. I designed logic gates tied to behavior patterns, passive-aggressive logging scripts, and keyword triggers that waited for months to detect specific phrases in executive emails. Nexus had detected them, especially Donald, the Golden Boy Chief Operating Officer whose online profile was full of corporate slogans, but who had a heart made of smoke. He had triggered the final clause by attempting to clone the middleware code. He had instructed the team to keep me happy until they had duplicated the core software. That was the action that woke the watchdog. And Nexus did not tolerate being cloned. 3 hours later, the Zurich connection went completely offline. The data pipeline was not just running slowly, it was dead. Their end-of-quarter audit system, which was built entirely on our proprietary interface, was outputting empty data packets. I did not receive a call from Daniel this time. Instead, I received a text message from Steven, my former intern. The text contained a single sentence. "They are in the emergency war room, and Donald just yelled your name like it was an insult." The message made me chuckle. I was standing in the frozen food aisle of the grocery store, holding a container of chocolate ice cream. A college student nearby backed away from me as if I were dangerous. I left the ice cream and walked out of the store because the game of chess had officially begun. I was playing without looking at the board, but the entire setup was already arranged in my favor. When you build a system over a decade, when you update it, support it, and work on it at 2 in the morning while everyone else is sleeping, you learn its rhythms. Nexus did not just follow basic instructions. The system responded to my specific design, and I had not programmed the system to be polite. At 5:42 in the evening, the company's internal communication system erupted. Screenshots of the panic were leaked online. An intern had panicked and shared an image in a public thread to explain the rollback event. The message was vague. Engineering team investigating unauthorized protocol execution from a deprecated automation system. Possible insider asset manipulation, system lockdown initiated. 10 minutes later, the email arrived in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Urgent. Consultation request from Donald Lanning, Chief Operating Officer." The message was filled with corporate politeness and hidden panic. "Julian, we understand there may have been a misunderstanding regarding your transition plan," Donald wrote. "We would greatly appreciate your insight into some recent platform issues. Please let me know when you are available to connect." Transition was a corporate word that always felt like a funeral in a casual hoodie. I forwarded the message to my personal archive to save it. I wanted to print it out and frame it eventually. Then I accessed the secure admin interface. The heartbeat monitor of Nexus was flashing amber, not red or green. Amber meant the system was waiting for my direct input. A single keystroke from my keyboard would stabilize the Zurich database, assemble the data, and align the pipelines as if the crash had never occurred. But I did not enter the key. I had not received an apology, and I had not discovered the full truth about what they were trying to copy. I looked at the access logs. There was a virtual private network address in Singapore that was repeatedly attempting to access the servers using a username that looked like mine but had different credentials. I remembered the details clearly. I sat with my coffee cup, watching the orange screen blinking on my dashboard interface. The logs displayed the specific Singapore IP addresses and the exact timestamps of the unauthorized attempts. 2 weeks before my termination, Donald's assistant had scheduled a meeting during my system walkthrough and then locked me out of the video conference, claiming it was a permissions issue. It turned out the issue had a specific name: Olivia, a senior system strategy analyst who was hired 6 weeks ago. She reported directly to Donald. I found her security credentials inside the software repository, showing she had been uploading modified code into the framework I had built. At first, her changes looked minor, just naming updates and code comments. But I knew the code thoroughly. She was attempting to rewrite the decision engine of Nexus, trying to teach the system to obey her credentials instead of mine. They had almost succeeded, except for one crucial detail. Nexus did not trust unfamiliar administrators. The system required digital tokens signed by my biometric key. When Olivia attempted to present a simulated token, Nexus did not just reject the access. The system logged the attempt, blacklisted her address, and activated a silent watchdog protocol that began recording everything Olivia touched, including her email communications, code modifications, and recorded video meetings. Yes, the watchdog was recording everything and saving the evidence securely in my private data partition. At 7:13 in the evening, I sat in my small apartment with a simple dinner and watched Donald, Olivia, and a third executive from finance discuss their strategy in a recorded meeting. The title of their presentation was Clone Contingency. I listened to them discuss my role. Julian is highly capable, but he is too rigid, Donald said on the recording. We do not need him, we only need his system. Olivia replied that she was almost finished copying the middleware. Once the new version was active, they would terminate my employment and announce that I had decided to retire early. The finance executive noted that they had already reclassified my stock options under the third quarter corporate adjustments to save money, claiming the legal department had confirmed the process was secure. They were already planning how to spend the bonuses as they were stealing from my work. At 7:26 in the evening, I returned to the Nexus administration dashboard. The heartbeat was still flashing amber and the watchdog was active. I entered a single command that I had not used in several years: initiate. The console requested my voice confirmation to proceed. I leaned close to the microphone and whispered a single word: burn. Across 6 servers located around the world, Nexus began to quietly corrupt the cloned code, slowing down the modules, increasing latency, and injecting errors into the databases. But the system was not finished. I had also programmed a feature called exposure. I wanted to ensure that when the process was complete, everyone would know what Donald had attempted to do and whose fingerprints were on the code. The executives did not notice the initial changes. That was the design of the system. I did not crash the systems immediately. Instead, I created quiet, public, and serious issues. The Zurich audit reports were recompiled with every timestamp shifted by exactly 13 hours. This was just enough to invalidate half of their fourth quarter compliance filings, but not enough to cause an alarm until the compliance officers reviewed the documents. The Singapore connection was still active, but Nexus routed it through a virtual machine to make it appear as if the access was coming from inside the company firewall using Olivia's credentials. At the same time, a phantom account named Julian's Ghost sent a message to the company's communication channels. The message read, "It is amusing that you attempted to copy the system, but forgot who created the soul." Donald deleted the message within 3 seconds, but Stephen took a screenshot in 2 seconds and shared it with the rest of the staff. By midnight, the executives had moved their emergency meeting to Conference Room B. The chief technology officer had flown in from the main office to assist. Olivia was nowhere to be found, and her phone was turned off. My former engineering team, including Sarah, Roger, and Peter, were being questioned by security officers as if they had staged a coup. The Human Resources Department sent out reminders about corporate confidentiality, and the legal team drafted messages to contain the panic. Meanwhile, I was logged into a private monitoring feed that I had established months ago. The interface displayed a black and white dashboard showing the system's status. Tonight, the indicator was glowing bright red. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Nexus executed the final step. The system detected that Olivia's modified code had been merged into the production database. The integration failed completely. Over 1,400 lines of code were replaced with random text. A message was added to the header. "You should not have attempted to erase him." The broken code went live on the production servers. Olivia's version began malfunctioning publicly, outputting errors on the client dashboards. One client screen showed infinite numbers, while another displayed random phrases. All the errors were signed with Olivia's digital credentials and recorded in the system logs, making the changes permanent and traceable. Donald called my phone at 1:27 in the morning. I let the phone ring twice before answering. His voice sounded desperate. "Julian, I do not know what you think you are doing," he said. I interrupted him immediately. "Do not worry." "Donald," I said, "this is not about revenge." There was a pause on the line. "Then what is it?" Donald demanded. "It is documentation," I replied. I sat in my small apartment with a simple microwave dinner and watched the recordings. The steam rose from the tray, carrying the scent of a processed meal, but I felt a deep sense of satisfaction as I listened to their arrogant voices discuss my career. I sent him the recorded video of their meeting where they discussed replacing me. I waited on the line. I heard a sharp intake of breath, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor, and a quiet curse. Then I hung up the phone. Nexus was already preparing the next phase of the protocol, and the company had not yet seen the full extent of the exposure. By sunrise, the story began to appear on technology news websites. The headlines described corporate surveillance, executive coup attempts, and database failures. The information was leaked through a dead man's switch I had built into the system. The switch was programmed to trigger if my administrative credentials were removed from the servers and if a cloned signature attempted to execute commands. This ensured that the truth would be exposed automatically if they tried to erase my presence from the platform. The system sent the documentation to 3 reporters. One was a former legal assistant who disliked Donald. The second was a financial reporter investigating the company's upcoming public offering. And the third was my sister-in-law, who worked in public relations and understood how to share stories. The video of the meeting was edited to protect privacy, but the voices of Donald and Olivia were clear. They could be heard laughing as they discussed reframing my termination as early retirement. Olivia had disappeared completely. Her phone was disconnected, and her online profiles were deleted. Donald claimed she was on personal leave. Nexus had changed from red to violet, indicating the final retribution protocol was active. At 9:12 in the morning, every client dashboard displayed a notification banner, System Optimization in Progress. Original architect Julian Cole available for consultations. My personal portfolio website received 34,000 visits in less than 2 hours, and my inbox was filled with messages from corporate recruiters. The subsequent audit revealed the full extent of the compliance failure. The attempted theft of the middleware had violated international data protection regulations, intellectual property laws, and at least 2 clauses in the contract with Zurich. The representatives from Zurich were furious and sent a formal cease and desist letter to the company's headquarters. Donald sent me a text message asking what I wanted to resolve the situation. I replied that he must state the truth on the record, or I would release the remaining files to the public. He did not reply immediately, but 3 hours later, he scheduled an emergency live broadcast with the board of directors. I was included on the invitation list as an observer. The board members were in a complete state of panic. Ronald Clayton, Dennis Foster, and Gloria Simmons sat in their respective office chairs, staring at their screens with pale faces. They had spent years building the reputation of Vanguard Cloud Systems, and now they saw their hard work threatened by a desperate executive maneuver. Gloria took off her glasses in complete shock when she saw the details on the screen, while Ronald leaned closer to his monitor, squinting as he realized the severity of the situation. Dennis put his head in his hands, muttering that their upcoming public offering was completely ruined. The broadcast began like a typical corporate meeting, filled with executive apologies and empty phrases. Donald stood before the camera, looking exhausted. His hair was untidy, and sweat was visible on his forehead. He referred to the theft as a systems replication project and admitted that the transition of my duties had been mismanaged, leading to database issues. The board members looked increasingly anxious as the presentation continued. They shifted in their seats and whispered to their assistants. Donald attempted to speak when I shared the screen, saying that we could discuss the matter privately, but I had already blocked his microphone access. Then, the broadcast feed switched to my webcam. I had not agreed to speak, but Nexus had activated the video link. I looked directly into the camera and kept my voice calm. For 22 years, I built a secure system for this company, I said. You terminated the architect and gave the credentials to an imposter, and now you are wondering why the walls fell down. I shared my screen, showing the complete records of Operation Puppet. I displayed the emails, the messages, and the documents detailing their plan to replace me and steal my work. The board members watched in silence as the evidence unfolded. The finance director tried to interrupt, but I had muted his microphone through my console access. I told them that they had built a company on software they did not understand, and that they had attempted to copy the architecture without understanding the design. I added that their actions had exposed them to severe liabilities. Then I disconnected from the broadcast. My inbox was filled with messages within seconds, including apologies, contract offers, and legal inquiries. But the most important part of the plan was still to come. The next morning, I returned to the headquarters. Nexus had reactivated my access badge at 3:12 in the morning, allowing me to walk past security without any issues. The guards at the front entrance simply nodded as I passed, either too tired to care or already aware of the changing power structure in the building. I took the elevator to the 16th floor and walked into Donald's office. He was sitting at his desk, looking pale and defeated. The office smelled of stale coffee and stress. I placed a red flash drive on the desk. The label read, "Backup, Nexus Restore." I told him that the system was restored, clean, and stable, and that the Zurich database was functioning normally. He looked at the drive, then looked up at me. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. I explained that chaos is inefficient, but exposure is permanent. I told him that I was finished with both. I explained the legal consequences of his actions. Under California Penal Code Section 449 or Section 470, forging my digital credentials to deploy the cloned system was a felony, making the entire deployment void ab initio. Under corporate law, this meant the company had no legal right to use the software, and any continued deployment was completely unauthorized from the beginning. Additionally, because I held the patents for the middleware under Title 35, United States Code, Section 271, the company's unauthorized use constituted active patent infringement. I had never transferred the intellectual property rights to the corporation, only granting them a personal, non-transferable testing license. The board members were facing personal liability for breaching their fiduciary duties to the shareholders by exposing the corporation to federal lawsuits just to secure their personal bonuses. I stated my 3 demands. First, Donald must resign immediately, admitting his executive misconduct. Second, all my unvested stock options must be fully restored, retroactive with bonuses. Third, Olivia's name must be completely removed from the development history. I told him that I would not share credit with a ghost. Donald nodded slowly, realizing he had no other option. I pushed the drive across the desk and walked out of the office, leaving him alone in the quiet room. I walked out of the executive suite with a deep sense of satisfaction, my boots making a slow, steady sound on the marble floor. The security guards nodded as I passed the reception desk. They had either heard the rumors or they simply recognized that the balance of power had shifted. My phone vibrated with a notification from Nexus. The message read, "System recovery complete. Threat signatures neutralized. Do you wish to delete the system backups?" I typed a brief response, "No, let them keep the files as a permanent reminder." That evening, I watched the official announcement of Donald's resignation. The board of directors released a statement thanking him for his years of service during a challenging transition. Olivia's name was completely scrubbed from all development records, repository commits, and company history. The company's new roadmap presentation included a slide that read, "Core architecture restored. Special thanks to Julian Cole." As I watched Donald's resignation live broadcast, the comments section scrolled rapidly on the side of the screen. Employees from various departments posted their reactions in real time, some sharing laughing emojis, others typing cynical slogans about executive accountability. It was clear that the hierarchy had lost its grip on the narrative. Daniel called me later that night from a local restaurant where the engineering team was celebrating. He told me that the atmosphere in the office had changed completely and that everyone felt a deep sense of relief. "We knew you built the foundation, Julian," he said. "We are glad you stood your ground." The other developers, including Sarah, Roger, and Peter, sent me personal messages expressing their gratitude for clearing their names and protecting their working environment. I had no intention of returning to Vanguard Cloud Systems. I had already begun organizing my own consulting firm, a smaller and more specialized operation designed to help independent software developers protect their intellectual property from corporate exploitation. I hired Steven, my former intern, as my first full-time associate. Steven was absolutely thrilled to join a business that valued technical skill and integrity over corporate politics. On our first afternoon in the new office, we set up our desks, arranged our technical equipment, and discussed our initial client projects with a shared sense of purpose. I sat in a quiet cafe near my apartment, drinking coffee and enjoying the evening. The money from my reinstated stock options and corporate bonuses had already been transferred to my bank account, ensuring my family's financial security. I could now support my mother's ongoing medical treatments and my sister's graduate school education without any constant worry. I called my sister that evening to tell her that her tuition was fully paid, and she cried with relief. I also spoke to my mother, reassuring her that her medical expenses were completely covered and that she would receive the best care available. My phone continued to ring with messages from technology firms, invitations to speak at conferences, and requests from legal teams. I received a call from Victoria, the head of the legal department, who confirmed that all the paperwork had been finalized. "You handled this situation with remarkable precision, Julian," she said. "The board understood that they had no legal defense against the evidence you provided." I smiled and thanked her before hanging up. I thought about how the company had treated me as a temporary resource, assuming that a quiet systems architect would simply accept his termination and walk away. They did not realize that the individuals who build the foundations are the ones who ultimately control the structure. I looked out the window at the city lights. I knew that corporate politics and executive greed would always exist, and that managers would continue to attempt to claim credit for the work of others. But I had demonstrated that with careful documentation, legal knowledge, and a well-designed system, an employee can stand up to the most powerful executives in the industry. I finished my coffee, closed my laptop, and walked out into the cool evening air. I felt a deep sense of relief, my shoulders free of the tension that had lived there for years. I was ready for my new venture, confident in my skills and my future. I had proved that you do not need to be the loudest voice in the room to win the battle. You simply need to have the truth on your side and the courage to enforce it. The two executives who believed they were untouchable had discovered that no amount of influence or corporate jargon could save them from their own documented actions. As I walked home, I thought about the advice I would offer to other professionals facing similar corporate betrayal. Never allow a company to convince you that you are replaceable. Your work, your expertise, and your integrity are your own. When they attempt to corner you, do not panic. Simply document every detail, understand your legal rights, and let the system you built defend you. The architect always knows how to manage the fortress. Thank you for reading, fellow survivors of the corporate grind. Remember to protect your work and subscribe for more stories of workplace justice. Let us make sure they think twice before they try to take what is yours.